to this story. New regulations issued by the Labour and Employment Department allow for workers who've tested positive for COVID-19 to return to work without first testing negative. Now, employees may return to work after 14 days of self-isolation and then be monitored by their employer. To explain this a bit further, we're now joined via Skype line by the Labour Department's Chief Inspector, that's Tibor Szana. Mr. Szana, thanks very much for your time and welcome to the AM report. So, in a context where science doesn't really tell us the course travelled by this virus within the body, are you able to give us an idea of, I guess, the scientific backing that allowed for this move?
Thank you very much for the opportunity afforded us. The direction that you referred to as regulations was developed at Nedlac by a group of experts in their various fields, which included doctors from the Department of Health, as well as academia and also organised labour. The science, as you call it, we know that the virus runs a particular course. This is known, and that course could be anything from 14 to 21 days. The 14 days, of course, allows one to see whether or not the virus itself whether or not the person is getting better as a result of being sick through the virus, of course. Now, after the 14-day period, it's anticipated that if you are better at that stage, there's most likely a chance that you will recover fully. So, in drafting this direction, it was felt that the 14-day period would suffice by the experts that sat together at Nedlac on this direction. It wasn't a regulation that was drafted on its own by the Department of Labour, but all the factors that are currently available and prevailing globally, the decision was taken that we can look at the 14 days as a reasonable period for people to have recovered. Of course, there are going to be people that will regress, but that is not going to be in the majority. And of course, we are saying that where there is severe and moderate illness that has been suffered, that is the second criteria point, then of course the worker must go and see a medical doctor in order to determine whether or not the person can return to work. And if they can, there are certain other precautionary measures, as you correctly said, that the employer must in fact monitor on the return of the worker.
Yeah. You mentioned how, it's not the majority of people perhaps who may have some kind of variation from this 14-day window period, for lack of a better term. But you and I both know all it takes is one, right? All it takes is one person who returns to work earlier than they should for there to be potentially even a cluster outbreak at some type of workplace. There are 5 conditions, though, that you mentioned that should be adhered to. Take us through those and how they address that possibility. The fact that that one person might in fact be the reason why there's an outbreak at a certain workstation.
I like the way you've said it, because the other point that one has to consider is that everyone has to follow all the measures that have been indicated as being the most suitable in order to contain the virus as far as possible. That includes wearing of masks, washing of hands, social distances, and that sort of thing. So even if you do have someone that is sick, the underlying issue here for us is to change our behavior in the way that we have been conducting ourselves up until now. If you look at the issues that we are raising, not only does the measures that have been put in place protect those that are at work and are well, those are also measures that will contain the virus if someone does in fact have it. You'll take another measure, for example, that is in place, disinfecting at the workplace. If you had to have someone that is sick at the workplace, or moderate, let's say the low-risk worker does pick up something from someone, there are certain requirements that are placed on that worker in order to keep the rest of the workers safe. If you are sick, it is believed, and I'm not talking about the type of sick where the person shouldn't be at work at all, I'm talking about the situation if someone is carrying the virus and they are at work and let's say they are, as we refer to it, asymptomatic. You can have the protection if you follow the certain measures that have been indicated. And I'll say them again. Wash your hands frequently. Sanitize where and when necessary. Keep social distances and those things. Those are known to protect or contain the virus and protect those in the vicinity of someone who is sick. You will also be aware that it has been indicated that even when someone is sick, they are especially required to be wearing a mask over and above the fact that we all are required to wear some other form of a mask. You'll also note that we don't only talk about the cloth masks at a workplace. There are various types of masks. Here we could talk about the N95. If a workplace, at a workplace, a worker is required to wear a respirator such as an N95 mask, then the employer should provide those masks. I think what we need to do and what we need to work on is allaying the fears rather than creating greater fear. There are measures that I've indicated several times now that can be put in place to protect both the worker from someone who is sick as well as protect the worker generally at the workplace. If you have someone who is sick and you're not aware of it, by you disinfecting your workplace frequently, where people that are sick have touched, you will obviously then be containing the spread of the virus by carrying out simple measures such as that.
Right. You and I had spoken before on this channel, and you had at that time raised concerns about the level of compliance within companies, and this was before we even went into level 4 and level 3 of the lockdown. The research I have suggests that last week already the department said there's only about 55% compliance from companies. That's just over half. With these new considerations to be, I guess, considered, how confident are you that, workplaces will be able to adhere to these type of measures and therefore, confidently allay fears that, this might lead to, again, another outbreak of COVID-19 at work?
And that is such a good question, which leads us to the next point, which is a new one in the direction. If workers feel in any way that their lives are endangered by the fact that the employer is not doing what is required in the direction, after following a certain process, such as informing the compliance officer, the health and safety representatives and so on, of the decision that the workers have made that they're going to leave the workplace, they can then leave the workplace. I repeat, they have to inform the employer of their decision to leave the workplace. So in doing that, the direction is very clear that the employer cannot victimize the workers in any way, and that if the workers feel that they need to take the matter further, they can take it up with the CCMA or the relevant bargaining council where there is one at that workplace. In that instance, then, the commissioner will make a decision that is binding on the employer. And at all times, the worker is deemed to be protected in terms of the direction that has been published. So it's not a case of, and these are the complaints that are coming through, that the employers are not doing enough at the workplaces. That is why we're having the low type of compliance level. It's still the situation where some appear not to be taking the matter seriously, both the employers as well as the employees in some instances. And we are asking and pleading with workers and the general public that they take heed of the simple measures that have been put in place to contain the virus that is currently pervasive in our society at large.
A lot of the focus has been on the workers, and rightly so, but there's also, I guess, something to be said about the employers. How many of them have weighed in about how comfortable they are with these regulations? Because it does put a considerable amount of responsibility on their shoulders to ensure that they don't oversee, again, a potential outbreak in their workspaces by allowing people to come back without testing negative yet. Has there been any kind of I guess, weighing in from that sector of this conversation?
I think, as I mentioned at the beginning of the discussion, that this matter was taken up at Nedlac. Nedlac is known for its social dialogue globally, and in that forum, you have business representatives, you have organised labour, and in certain instances, you'll have the community as well as government. Now, government does not publish any legislation without the direct involvement of the tripartite bodies, being government, the employers, representatives, as well as the organised labour. So you're dealing with a direction here that was not unilaterally published by the Department of Employment and Labour at all. There were various government departments, not just the Department of Employment and Labour, involved in this as well. And this direction that you've seen that has been published on the 4th of June has gotten the blessing of the employer representatives in general. When you do legislation, when you're drafting legislation and you publish it, my experience over the last number of decades is that you will never please everyone, or you won't find acceptance for legislation from every single person as opposed to every single body, because we allow bodies to participate in the development of legislation.
Right.
So in this case, there was no dissenting voices in the bodies that were involved in the development of this direction.
All right. Thanks for getting us into the picture as best as you can. We'll see how this all pans out.